This programme was produced at and first aired on MPR, Manawatu People's Radio, with support from New Zealand On Air. Ka pai Irarangi Tamotu, MPR.
Kia ora and welcome to Reserved Recommendations. This is a show about great trash, difficult art, and our complicated relationships with art and culture. My name's Hugh, I'm the host of the show, and I'd like to take this opportunity to put in a very mild content warning for the show as a whole. Sometimes our recommendations on this show are reserved just because the thing that we're discussing is in some way not good, but sometimes there are aspects of the art or artist that may be confronting for some people. Check the episode descriptions for more information, and do be aware of your listening environment. That's right, we are back once again on another episode of Reserved Recommendations. This is a radio show and podcast produced by Manawatu People's Radio, Te Reo Irirangi o ngā tangata o Manawatu. We look at problematic faves, great trash, and difficult art. And this evening, I am joined by returning champion John Cecil, who enlightened me about the wonders of the Misfits, if you want to go back and hear the previous conversation we had. And also Elana Levin, who is host of a podcast called Graphic Policy Radio that looks at comics and comics-adjacent media through a queer, leftist, social-political lens. That sounds deeply podcasty. And also Deep Space Dive, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast, which, again, has a sort of a leftist and policy-looking lens. So thank you both very much for joining me this evening to enlighten me about another musical genre that I don't really understand all that well. And I suppose like a good starting point for me not understanding it very well is that John said, we could talk about hair metal. And I said, yeah, that sounds great. And Elana said, what do you mean by hair metal? So do you want to maybe start by unpacking that a little bit?
So there's different definitions, and I've kind of become someone, let me tell you, my teenage self is shocked and dismayed that this is now my pursuit, but I've kind of become someone who's explains hair metal to people now. But there are multiple ways of thinking about this genre / marketing concept. And as someone who was alive during the heyday of this, but was very young and therefore kind of witnessing it with a child's eyes, a lot of my perspective is rooted in research and in interviewing people. But I was a very impressionable age when the era ended. So I have a lot of personal insight about that transition. But anyway, when people say hair metal, it's are you talking about any kind of metal that was popular metal during the 80s? Or are you talking about a particular scene that really originated on the Sunset Strip of Los Angeles in that time period? It had a particular sound that became very influential and had offshoots that cropped up around the country and internationally. Or are you talking about a marketing term that is used now to package a lot of those bands, including the international entries, and resold to Gen Xers as something they can participate in, to help us pretend that we're not on our way to dying? Or are you talking about it as an insult? Because hair metal was initially I don't want to say a slur. Hair metal is originally an insult, an insulting description slung at the genre by its detractors. So and not everybody has seen it that way. And I've heard people who lived in different places in the world swear to me that they themselves listened to this music and believed that was a positive term at the time. But generally speaking, it's recognized as something that was developed. People would talk about hair bands with long hair. They would say glam metal. And I think glam metal is, generally speaking, the more accurate term for a lot of it. But yeah, hair metal is kind of a retroactive category. And it's something where, when you say you want to talk about hair metal, I can talk about all of those things, but they are different things. So
I wanted to save that for this because we were emailing each other talking about the parameters of the discussion, and we ended up discussing, does this count, does that count? Which is, to me, something that I just do when I'm talking to friends, because that's the asshole that I am. I am probably the oldest person here. Between the three of us, I saw Guns N' Roses open up for Motley Crue, and I saw Sonic Youth open up for Nirvana.
Right.
I know that I am not alone in that. I'm not the only person who saw Motley Crue and Nirvana. I know I'm not, but I don't know that the number of people who can say that is in the tens of thousands. I don't know that that's the case. Right. We're a pretty small group of people. So I was in high school during the height of hair metal. I was in middle school when it really blew up. I was in elementary school when it was brewing. So I was aware of, it was Def Leppard was the Rock of Ages video, had a sword in it. And we were a bunch of, elementary school nerds who played D&D. So we liked Def Leppard. We didn't know that it was called heavy metal or hair metal. Well, that's the other thing. You're 100% right that if anybody called it hair metal before, let's say 91, 92, somewhere in there, if somebody did use that term, and I'm sure somebody did, it was not, MTV didn't have a let's watch hair metal show. There was no, now that's hair metal CD. That term was a marketing tool to disparage the thing from 5 years ago so they can sell the new thing.
Yes.
Right. Which, I mean, if you look at the length of hair on the leading grunge bands, the condition of the hair is different, but the length of it isn't really.
It's very similar. Sure. And there's overlaps. There are people who were in both, but you got exactly. The marketing term was about supporting the bands that were pop metal bands of the 80s was expensive for labels. They tended to need lawyers. They tended to want things like cars that were nice. They needed music videos with like scantily clad women. This was not cheap music to make, even though it began as such. It certainly began as such. Yeah. And I imagine the second you see something new coming that looks like it might be a lot cheaper to produce, like you're going to be all about telling people that old thing is for idiots and it's not cool anymore. And here's the next new thing. And it was it was insulted and it was dismissed. And that's part of why teenage Elana is like, why are you someone who goes on other people's podcasts to explain hair metal? This is embarrassing to everyone involved. But I've come to really love this music because it is really fun. If you like guitar solos and you like pop melodic melodies and you like very enthusiastic, often high-pitched vocals, then you would like this. Yeah. And this is wildly popular music in its heyday is the other thing, which people very much forget. This was mainstream for a little bit of time there.
Yeah, it 100% was. The for myself, it was D&D, playing Dungeons and Dragons with my nerdy brothers and my nerdy friends. I had my grandmother saw somewhere that I was going to commit suicide and worship the devil because of Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
And it was the first time that an adult was just wrong. Like I know what I'm talking about. Like there's plenty to criticize, but that isn't it. That I'm not worshiping the devil and I'm not going to commit suicide. And then shortly after that, Ozzy Osbourne was on TV because he was in trouble for getting people to commit suicide and worship the devil. And so I was all in. I was like, well, then clearly I need to check this out. So I went and bought the Blizzard of Oz record, probably a record, come to think of it. And that still wasn't enough. What happened for me, so I liked that. I liked hard rock, but I couldn't tell you the difference between Billy Idol and Ozzy Osbourne in the middle of the 80s. And the spoiler alert is there really isn't much of one. But MTV said this guy's this and this guy's that. I mean, and which we should definitely talk about how big MTV.
Yes.
Absolutely.
The shadow that it cast on all these things. But in 1987, I had an uncle who I thought was the coolest guy in the world. And three things happened in 1987. The first is that Motley Crue released an album called Girls, Girls, Girls. And that album fucking rules.
Yes.
It's so good.
Yes.
At the same time, the Beach Boys released a single with the Fat Boys, the rap act. It was a cover of Wipeout that they sing and rap over. Do you remember this? Do you guys?
No, but this is like something I would be into. So
you need to check it out.
Really?
You need to check it out
This is
because the pardon me, the premise of the video anyway is the Beach Boys go to California. No, the Fat Boys go to
Fat Boys
California.
go to California,
and the
yeah.
Beach Boys come to New York, right? And the Fat Boys in California are doing green screen surfing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the Beach Boys in New York are riding around, and I can't remember if they're waving a magic. They're doing something, and they're like turning New Yorkers into Californians, right? And at one point, I think it's Al Jardine. Is doing the turntable record scratch thing.
Yeah.
And he has this look on his face, and it was the cringiest fucking thing. And it wounded me because little kid me loved the Beach Boys,
Sure.
and my cool uncle who gave me beer every now and again, and he'd play Beach Boy songs. That same uncle in 1987 thought that Eric Clapton was God.
Was God, right?
Yeah.
Because of that.
And Eric Clapton, I guess he had re-released an earlier single of his, not John Cale, JJ Cale is the guy's name?
Oh, Cocaine, yeah?
After Midnight.
Ah, yes.
And it was in a beer commercial. And so it's Eric Clapton in a beer commercial. And the uncle who I thought was really, really cool did the air guitar lip bite thing when this fucking beer commercial came on. And these three things together made me want my own music, made me want to the boomers who I thought were cool, maybe they're not, and maybe there's something else. And Girls is really fucking good, and so I dove into that and became like a heavy metal guy is what I thought it was, because I like the Scorpions too. I already had that Ozzy record from before, but the idea that the Scorpions are substantially different than Motley Crue, I never saw it.
Right.
Being there at the time. And then when Guns N' Roses came out, if you showed, I've got an 11-year-old boy over here. He's my son.
Sure.
There's an 11-year-old boy in the next room. And I don't know that he's ever seen a picture of Guns N' Roses. I don't think. If I showed him that and I showed him a picture of Alice in Chains, he would see no difference. He would see no difference at all.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. No, I was making memes for election night watch parties to encourage this, not the most recent presidential, but the one before that, encouraging people to not declare loss until all the votes came in. So I did like a meme that was of the Guns N' Roses Patience music video. And I posted it for the folks. I was like, okay, so who is this? And the younger people, and not that much younger than me, were like, oh, it's Nirvana. And I said, you know what? That's fine. We can use this. The point is, I need you to recognize that this is a rock star. Yeah. So long as you look at this person and you say, this is a rock star, this meme will work. Right. That's fine. But no, that's not Kurt Cobain. And what's so interesting is Axl loved Nirvana. Like Axl totally embraced the whole grunge thing, as did a lot of the guys from that era. And sometimes you could say cynically, sometimes it's earnest, and some of them literally were friends with each other from before. But I love, and I totally respect how Kurt is like, no, fuck you. You're totally the guys who beat me up in school. And I'm like, it's true. So it's like, it's fine that you guys say it's fine for this like weird dynamic to happen. I totally understand it. It makes sense to me. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, when would you say, Elana, when would you say hair metal starts? We mentioned what I love to drop on people is Van Halen hair metal, because they objectively are, but for some reason they're not.
Well, because they're the first. So basically, granted, this is me looking at it through a very Halen-centric lens, but prior to Van Halen, there was really a lull in the American popular heavy music sphere. Like, you had Kiss, which had a very narrow cast audience, but and Aerosmith wasn't. It's sort of debatable, like whether you would think of them as. It's funny because like they're not. Heaviness is a relative term. Aerosmith is not really heavy, but like they were kind of in that kind of vein in people's minds. there wasn't really much coming out of America, and you suddenly, even though there's great music, like I love Montrose, for example, but like nobody fucking cared.
Alice Cooper in there, but
and Alice just keeps going. He's his own thing. Like he's his own.
Right.
And Alice Cooper in the late 70s, early 80s is like playing with new wave. Alice Cooper has gone avant-garde.
What's it called? Clones? Is that what it's called?
Clones, yeah. I did a whole TED talk on that.
Right.
So like I'm not joking. So like it's a weird period, and through sheer being excellent and playing constantly, Van Halen breaks through. Kiss helped discover Halen, but they didn't like actually get them the contract, but they brought them over to bring it, to that point. But after Van Halen becomes big, suddenly there is an opening for more American, like aggressive, like I don't want to say heavy, but it's kind of heavyish rock bands. So all of those bands that came in, and they all came up next, they're all coming up through the Sunset Strip. And LA has been a hotbed for popular music for forever, basically, anyway. So in some ways, we take it as a given that this is an LA thing because so many things are. But like, no, really, this is an LA thing because there was a scene and they were friends with each other. They knew each other. They were trading around band members. Everybody was in a band called London for 5 seconds. I'm not even joking. Yeah. So like there was and that's the thing that I don't think people quite get, because there really are bands that we know of that are from other parts of the country, but LA was a scene. There was a hair metal scene, glam metal scene, or hard rock scene. And generally speaking, people would have just called it a heavy metal scene. Now, what I want to know is if you're Venom over in England and you're playing like extreme metal, do you think that what's happening in LA is metal, or are you just like, oh, that's cheesy commercial metal? Or are you hearing that and you're like, I don't know what that has to do with me? Right. I'm very curious. Venom, if you're listening, please let me know. Because like, right. But
no, that's I've never thought about that. Or Saxon, but like Judas Priest, like that has to have like they have to, because they've met those guys.
Oh yeah, totally. But that's all British. So like, the new wave of British heavy metal is influencing all these artists in America, but there isn't an American band that has taken on that level of popularity yet. Yeah. And so surely, having Maiden and Priest and all that, but especially Maiden was big, and definitely was more financially.
You can say that Def Leppard has a foot on either side.
Yes, absolutely. And like, so that helps sort of bring it through. But Van Halen was a huge inspiration and just showed people that there was an appetite for this. And so you then get the Followers, and the Followers are bringing in a range of influences beyond just Van Halen. But Van Halen, the first album is 79, and we're looking at the first albums that most people would consider hair metal coming out like a year later. So it's, Van Halen had been known all over LA and the whole Valley area for years before. They were a band that was touring hard, playing. Everybody'd seen them. So
one of the things that I certainly noticed, because you very kindly gave me a Spotify playlist to have a listen to as a kind of a grounding with the Van Halen influence, is that even bands where the guitarist clearly wasn't that much of a shredder, they would have 2 or 3 bars of Van Halen shredding. So they would do a kind of like a standard, like high powered blues, basically solo. And then they would go whittly, 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 whittly for as long as they could sustain it. And then they would go back to their other because everyone had to have that little Eddie Van Halen thing, at least for a second.
Yeah. Yeah.
A thing about the influences is that there's this guy, Rodney Bingenheimer. Do we all know who he is? He's a guy. He I think he wanted to be an actor, and he auditioned to be in the Monkees, but he looked. And I want to say he was Davy Jones's like stunt double or something like that. And then what happens is he is a Anglophile in Los Angeles, and he opens up a nightclub that he has people from England come and play at. And so a lot of Bowie's first American shows were at I think it was called the London Disco or something. This is before disco. So it was just
right when it meant
in like club. The 60s. Yeah. And then at some point his club closes. And so he gets a radio show called Rodney on the Rock on the K-Rock station in Los Angeles. And he is pretty much given a lot of credit for breaking Blondie on the West Coast and Joan Jett. But he played Slade and T-Rex Mott the Hoople, Sweet. He played those bands in LA. And this is before MTV, which the thing about MTV is there is now a national, and this country is 2,000 miles across, a kid in Washington State and a kid in Miami. I mean, it's 3 hours later, but they're seeing the same things. Whereas before MTV, you've got some top 40, like Casey Kasem had a syndicated radio show, but you had local radio stations. So that the Flying Burrito Brothers, growing up in Florida, no one knew the fuck these guys were. And Meatloaf wasn't really well known on the West Coast. That was a thing once upon a time in the States before. And so in Southern California was getting all this British glam stuff in the late 60s, early 70s. And those listeners would have gone on to be these.
So I want to thank you, because I have been saying, I think maybe this might actually be how we connected online, but there's a saying that, the Velvet Underground only sold 1,000 records, but everybody who bought one started a band, punk band. Yeah. I swear all 100 Slade albums that sold in America were guys in LA who formed glam metal bands. Yeah. Because no Americans don't know Slade. They don't even know the Christmas song. They know nothing. But there's a guy in LA. I'm sorry.
The band Mott the Hoople. Americans do not know them. Yeah.
Yeah. But literally Axl is I love Mott the Hoople. Not every single band from the scene, if you look up their interviews, and I have, is going to mention those bands, but some of them do, and I hear it in their music. I swear to God. It's not, people will be it's just the style that's similar. I'm it's not just the style.
It's certainly hard to look at these guys who, because right at the start you mentioned the expense of this style of music, and part of it is part of the expense is that the image of the bands is an enormous part of, not necessarily you can listen to the music and it has its own appeal, but if you look at the videos and the album covers and all of that stuff, it's about the massive fantasy by way of science fiction shoulder pads and spiky cod pieces and enormous hair and makeup and all of that stuff. And certainly it's hard to hear people making heavy rock music and making those kinds of moves with their images and not compare that, at least aesthetically, to British glam, certainly.
Yeah, but also the New York Dolls. So that's this is interesting. The New York Dolls, great example of a band that most people had never heard of, right? Yeah. But Blackie Lawless is the final replacement member of the Dolls, as the band is breaking up and dissolving and on some tour event, and he plays in the Dolls for 8 minutes. And as a result, he has as much cred to be taken seriously by everybody else in the scene as he could possibly need in LA. So everybody's well, I was going to play with Blackie because, Blackie had been in the Dolls. Right. So to me, it was saying something to have all these interviews with these guys saying, well, Blackie had been in the Dolls. That's a big thing, which implies that that they heard them. And that's East Coast versus West Coast. The Dolls were New York as fuck, they had big shows. They played, Toronto was a big show, and LA is the other big market in the country. So they're present there too. But I think that sort of proto-punk musical influence is what I think distinguishes it from other forms of poppy metal. And I think what also makes Def Leppard be different sonically from a lot of the other things, because I don't think Def Leppard have ever heard of the New York Dolls. Although I take it back, I changed my mind, right? Because Phil Simon was in Girl. So he at least had heard the New York Dolls, or else he wouldn't have been in a band called Girl. But he was joined the band after they existed.
Yeah, so. I want to say I saw something about Joe Elliott saying he thought the strength of Def Leppard was that they had a guy who played, I want to say he said Angus Young, and we have a guy who plays Johnny Thunders. I think he said beautiful. Something like that.
That's
we have two guitarists, and one of them is really tight, and one of them is kind of all over the place.
I
may have every single proper noun in there messed up.
Well, so. I also am convinced that he's heard them since then, right? Yeah, but I'm just saying that as a British person at the time, this was not, But Like there was that one tour, and then there was another tour, and like I don't know how many people. Whatever. Anyway, they're notorious. It's so
they represent sort of a bridge between this style of music and back to things like the Velvet Underground as well, right? Like they're sort of closer to that sort of noisier proto-punk kind of thing.
You can draw a line from the Velvet Underground to Iggy Pop. And from Iggy Pop, it's a really straight line from Iggy Pop through the 70s into hair metal.
But the thing with hair metal is ultimately it's pop music. It's got pop music melodies. So all of the things that are weird about it, it's like there's packaging. There is not the sonic experimentation. That's a lot of that is strictly because like Eddie Van Halen figured out some crazy shit he could do with his guitar. You know,
that's true. I mean, that's the thing. One of the things we were emailing about was why doesn't Journey count? Like legitimately.
Because they don't count.
Why isn't Journey? Why isn't if Gina and Tommy are living on a prayer? Why isn't that kid in South Detroit also a hair metal character? Like, why not? Why isn't REO Speedwagon hair metal? Why?
But, I mean, those 70s bands.
Why is Bon Jovi?
Well, yeah, because those 70s, Bon Jovi is, I'll get to him, but like the 70s, those other bands are very, very 70s still. And like ultimately hair metal is like in 80s style. So if you're Journey, even though you continue to put out albums, you're a 70s band, you know, like that's what they sound like.
I don't know that Bon Jovi sounds that different. So like REO
Bon Jovi is Springsteen plus Van Halen equals Bon Jovi. Like it's very straightforward.
Yeah,
that's it. And because Van Halen is in there, ergo, it's considered part of hair metal. It's just they don't sound that much like other bands.
Like any of those other bands, yeah.
They really, because there's so much Springsteen and they're like so New Jersey, but they have the Van Halen to it. They really do. I mean, so it's I think that there are different threads that are coming together to form this, but ultimately this is a form of 80s pop music metal. Mm-hmm. So when things get too experimental, when things become too 70s-y, it sort of falls out of that. What's interesting is near the end of the genre, everybody decides they're a cowboy for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And that counts. That's all part of it. That's all okay. So you can also be a cowboy.
It's interesting because it's almost like the 60s pop into psychedelia into everyone hears the band and puts out like an Americana album, but doing it as like a 5-minute speed run, you know?
Yes. And but the other thing is a lot of the bands in this scene were also very blues influenced, some more than others. I mean, like you have Cinderella, who I adore, who are just literally a blues band with distortion, like as much as you could say that about Sabbath or Danzig, but with hair metal vocals, right? But there are other bands that are not, like Rat has a couple of fabulous blues songs, but largely isn't a blues band. So the degree of blues influence also sort of will fluctuate, you know, between it.
But that goes to the fact that there is a really wide pool here, where on a Spotify, I mean, I drink the Kool-Aid. I'm an Apple guy, so I have an Apple Music playlist that I looked through, and I saw Night Ranger on there, which all right, why not? And then Crazy.
They're from the scene. I don't care for them, and they sound very 70s to me. Nothing wrong with 70s, but they sound different to me.
Someone at Apple thinks they count, and they think that the Scorpions count. Which all right. I mean, it's just that you can make the case that if the pool is this wide, and deep, that a lot of things, like you could be really into Cinderella. I was, and you could be really into like around the same time that Shot Through the Heart, Bad Name songs around the same time as the first Cinderella record, that in my opinion they just don't sound very similar, but they would be played next to each other, and that if you say I dislike hair metal, I find that hard to believe that anyone would say I dislike hair metal, because there's something there. Because we're talking about if Van Halen counts, we're going from like 78, 79 through largely credited about September of 1991. That is a really long fucking time. That is longer than the Beatles were together. That is much longer than the grunge era. There is a lot of it, and it is very, very different from each other in different directions.
And there's a different impact as well, right? Like I was just in terms of like burgeoning musical awareness, I started really paying attention to music that wasn't my parents' music in like 93, 94-ish. People were like giving me home dubbed bootleg Nirvana tapes at high school. Right. So that was the sound of the 90s for me. Was I was into Nirvana, I was into Radiohead, I was into the Smashing Pumpkins, and then there was some other sort of, but it was mostly like grunge and Britpop were the two main things that I listened to. Sure. And my wife and the kids decided to listen to like all of the hits, because you can get playlists on YouTube which are like the top 100 songs from every year. If you do that for the years where I felt like in my heart grunge was king, actually the top 100 is all R&B. Yeah. Like and I'm pretty sure that if you did that for the period in the 80s that we're talking about, you would hear a lot more hair metal than you hear grunge in the bits of the 90s, you know?
Like
that is such a great point. Sorry, Elana.
Cinderella had platinum albums. Cinderella, a band who, when I mention them to most people my age, they don't know who I'm talking about. Wow. Okay? Like that people bought albums and fans bought albums and people really bought albums. Yeah. You know, so like just to sort of situate myself, like I'm of the generation where I remember when Nirvana happened and that changed everything. And prior to that, we were all into like Metallica and Guns N' Roses, you know what I mean? And we were into them in that moment where the media was already beginning to tell us that hair metal was bad. But it was still kind of lingering. And there were some bands, like it was okay to like Motley Crue still because they were harder, even though their last album in that era was actually very radio friendly, but also good. So there's nothing wrong with liking it. But you know, it was like that transition moment. But my friends had, but I had friends with older siblings who were like, you know, into Def Leppard. And like, so if you had big older siblings, you would know these bands. But it was, I really didn't. But anyway, my point is that I don't think I really fully grasped how big selling everything was until you look at music videos where you see the crowd sizes of like how many people are in this to like see Autograph, like who like, right? It's wild. It was such a huge phenomenon. I don't know, the US Festival, any of that footage you can see. And this is a moment where you also are having like the English beat, or just the beat as you would call them abroad, is, you know, playing like ska in America. And like which is a completely different planet than anything that's coming out of American music.
Look, this is a fantastic conversation. I am really enjoying it. We are around about the halfway point, so we do need to take a brief break for station messages. We will do that, and we will be back right after this.
This programme was produced at and first aired on MPR, Manawatu People's Radio, with support from New Zealand On Air. Ka pai irarangi Tamotu, MPR.
You're listening to Reserved Recommendations, a radio show and podcast on Manawatu People's Radio Te Reo Irarangi o ngā tangata o Manawatu, produced with the assistance of New Zealand On Air, so cheers for that, guys. This evening I am talking to John Cecil and Elana Levin about hair metal, and we have been having, I haven't said much, which is amazing. I really like when that happens. It's great. I want to mention a thing that I noticed on the way, a couple of things that I noticed on the way past. One of them was about, we were kind of talking about the LA-ness of hair metal, and I find that very interesting because, as I was saying about unrelated stuff, in New Zealand, like, there are a couple of very regional music moments. There is a thing called the Dunedin sound tied to my old hometown, which is like one record shop owner in this small university town got super into the Velvet Underground and started handing Velvet Underground tapes to high school kids. So there's this wave in the 80s of like super jangly lo-fi pop out of Dunedin for like otherwise non-obvious reasons. And there's some other stuff, but it's not really regional. However, I have been listening to a fantastic podcast called 500 Songs, which is a history of rock music in 500 songs. And one of the things that guy talks about, Andrew Hickey, is this shift of cultural power that happens at various points in American music between like New York and LA and then San Francisco when it gets to the kind of psychedelic era. And there's these sort of almost like cultural power struggles about who gets to be setting the tone for culture. And I thought that was really interesting. And I wondered if also the fact that all these bands were LA was maybe a factor in what makes them able to become so showy and expensive in terms of image. Like that doesn't seem like a thing that would necessarily happen, or that seems like a thing that patently didn't happen when things briefly shifted to Seattle and everyone was wearing check shirts for what?
I'll tell you part of why that happened though. So all of the styling work was all being done by folks' girlfriends who were all strippers. So you have like women who are styling. I mean, I don't want to say like literally, but like disproportionately. So you have women who are doing styling them who are like, they're like, we know how to do heavy makeup. We know how to like do that. And so it's something that was that style look was like women styling men for a female audience aesthetic that also was androgynous, because like that's what a lot of folks, assigned, who are into. So, and LA is notorious like a big strip club city. So I think in addition to being a showbiz, it's also the other kind of showbiz too, right? So that's like a big piece of it. Yeah.
The other thing that you mentioned that I just kind of it occurred to me listening to the playlist was that we were talking about like the blues influence, which is classically a bit of rock, but I think one of the things that makes metal and particularly hair metal, particularly hair metal-y, is that in some ways they're less bluesy. If you listen to what Eddie Van Halen does, for example, he's not really playing blues licks anymore. He's playing something that would be like classical guitar if you played it at a quarter of the speed.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think there's just different tendencies in there. So like you have a lot of guys who are like him and they're just not doing the blues stuff. And then there's other guys who are. And I'm going to have to think about, off the top of my head, I kind of think the bluesy stuff is maybe a little bit more East Coast in origin, but maybe I'm just thinking about Cinderella.
Were they from
Philly?
Philadelphia.
Philly. Yeah. And the Philly Philly and New Jersey are all in the same touring ecosystem.
Yeah, right.
So you have like, later on you get Skid Row, but it's like the Bon Jovi, Cinderella, like there's a hub, scene from there. Long Island.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they can all, and the Philly scene can play New York very easily. It's like not the same, but you can get there. It's fast.
Yeah.
So it's his own sort of stylistic hub, perhaps, in certain ways. But it's true. Like Eddie Van Halen is an extremely innovative musician. Like it's not. Mm-hmm. I don't care if you like him or not. It's a fact. He is. I
think there are only when it comes right down to it, three important. I'm not saying good. I'm saying important. There are only three important guitarists, and Eddie Van Halen is the last one.
Okay, tell me who they are, though. I want to hear your list.
Well, the second one we already know who he is, and so I'm not going to say his name because we all know who it is. The first one is Chuck Berry. I think there's before Chuck Berry and guitar after Chuck Berry. Another guy from Seattle, incidentally, who became a celebrity in England, and then Eddie Van Halen is who, because to this day you are either chasing Eddie Van Halen or you are deliberately not doing what Eddie Van Halen created.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes.
Because there's a guitarist that I have followed the career of, because this is sort of things that I was put onto by my dad, basically. But there's an English guitarist called Richard Thompson, who is a very individual player and very unique. But he's doing exactly that. He is Firstly, he's his own little cul-de-sac and almost nobody plays like Richard Thompson ever. But also his style is the product of self-consciously trying not to follow the other great influential guitarists and seeing what happens if you go in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And so, you know...
Stylistically, that also happened for real. Like David Lee Roth from Van Halen is a great raconteur of many quotes, one of which was that rock critics hate me and love Elvis Costello because rock critics look like Elvis Costello. And like, he's not wrong. I mean, like, I think that there's a massive counter reaction to them even in their period, as happens with any kind of form of music. And I'm glad that we have both of these things because they're both great. And I kind of enjoy how they hate each other. I just wish that people today in the modern world looking back at the past can say, it's okay to like all of these things.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Well, when it comes to hair metal being problematic, the obvious one is the sexism. Which Elana, you mentioned that like it's no less sexist than other stuff then, now, and before. Two Live Crew were like they were contemporaries with these gentlemen. Something that occurred to me was that hair metal isn't particularly racist, but it's because there's nothing except white dudes.
No, wrong.
Nothing.
There are Latino guys who like, there's multiple Latino guys, including some of them who like, you're gonna be like, oh, I didn't realize Vince Neil is Latino.
Is he really?
Because it's California. So like, you know, so like it doesn't have as much diversity how like all of the not all, but like, you know, lots of the thrash bands have like people of color in them because it's like Bay Area and you know, it's like Texas. It's like, well, where are you from? But there's definitely some racial diversity. It is very much not black, I can say, but there's definitely Latino guys throughout. And Asian, Eddie Van Halen and Alex Van Halen are Asian American, and like, people didn't quite always get that, but like that's the world they lived in. Like their mom, you know, and like that's why their family moved to America, because their mom and their dad were like dealing with racism in their home country that they felt like would be a little bit less extreme if they moved to the U.S., which has more intermarriage. So it's like,
isn't he?
I'm sorry.
Slash is black, isn't he?
Yeah, Slash is black and Jewish, and I guess people sometimes will argue whether or not that's like, you know. I'm sorry, they're arguing about Guns N' Roses. They're not arguing about Slash's racial identity. That's not debatable. But I think that, and there are racist songs too, but it's not much. It's all frankly Axl, really. You're in a band with like multiple people.
Have you listened to that recently? 1 in a Million?
But he's disavowed it. Now, I'm not saying Axl's. That's good. Yeah, because it's like, it's also not even good. It's like, that's the thing is that maybe like 2 years ago, I was like, yeah, you know, I remember that. Like, what was going on? And so I listened to it. It's terrible. Yeah. It's not even good. So it's like you sort of struggle, you know, I'll struggle because it's like, I think the best song by Cinderella is the G word road. Now, he's not using that word in a negative way, but he's using it in a stereotypical way, certainly. And I know that there are people who are Omani who are like, yes, that's the term they used to refer to themselves, but he's speaking about it in a very exoticized way. But I'm like, I don't know. Am I going to put that song in my playlist for people, or am I going to put other Cinderella songs?
That's almost like a holdover from the 70s as well, though. Because that was a point that, again, Andrew Hickey made. Is in the intro to an episode, he said, look, I'm going to have to say this word because there's this period in American music where everyone names everything for reasons that I don't really understand.
He's gonna get to Fleetwood Mac, yeah.
But
and it's also, I mean, like in America, it's treated like it's a fictional identity, whereas in Europe, it's like it's those people who we oppress as our daily hobby.
It's like pirate or ninja or something, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Americans think that the Romani people are like pirates or fucking ninjas, and Europeans are like these are people of color and we hate them and they're untrustworthy. And it's a very different dynamic.
Lest we forget that when the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were exported to the UK, which is where I encountered them as a Saturday morning cartoon, they were the Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles because you couldn't say ninja on television. For reasons which are I think it's just racism. That's the only thing that makes sense, is that they somehow thought that if you said ninja, you would open the possibility of orientalizing children somehow. It doesn't make any sense to me, but that's the way it was.
So what I'll say about sexism in hair metal is ultimately, like, the main sexism is that there are like a negligible number of bands with women in them. That's the thing. When it comes to sexism in lyrics, I think it's on par with other popular music. I don't think it's worse. But what I think is really gets lost, I mean, there's plenty of offensive stuff, but like there's plenty of offensive stuff in like good guy music, right? But what I think gets lost in the conversation is how much of the rejection of hair metal was rooted in sexism, because hair metal was designed for the female eye and was styled by like women, and the fandom was women. So like if you went to a metal show and it was swarmed with women, chances are it was a glam metal band. I go to metal shows, and they're definitely more balanced now than they used to be, but it's not like you're ever going to go to a metal show and it's like all women, but it would be disproportionately women back in the day. And I think that there was a narrative that was being sold that if you liked these bands, you only liked them because they were cute, and that we had to replace them with good/serious music that was about music, not style. So if you liked those bands, you were a troglodyte and or just a horny bitch. Yeah. And then you better listen to these bands with these guys who can't be bothered to brush their hair. Like, guy, fucking brush your hair, motherfucker. Put some effort and some style into this. But like, it was basically the assumption was that you couldn't possibly like this for what it is as music. Yeah. It was sexist. It was really sexist.
That's like given specifically Kurt's stance on gender stuff and like later weird post-mortem adoption by young trans women in particular. Like that's intensely ironic because he was someone who had no time for that kind of macho posturing. And I think, Nirvana is far from the only grunge band, but they are certainly the one that are the Van Halen moment that kicked the whole thing off. It changed fucking everything. You make an interesting point about, Elana, about there not being that many women in the bands, because I think, that's a thing that people might try and compare against stuff from later in the 90s, but I would argue that a lot of, and this is not to say that those musicians were not good musicians and didn't deserve their success, but I think that the reason that a lot of women-fronted bands, particularly in the earlier bit of the 90s, got success was kind of through the blessing of Saint Kurt. If Kurt said that something was cool, then he had this brief window where he was kind of the arbiter of popular culture. He was. Because he valued female musicians, there was that was in some ways a wedge, but there was still a lot of dudes in other scenes that weren't hair metal. There are a lot of bands that are just dudes in lots of scenes.
Yes, exactly. It's not unique to the genre. It's striking to me. There's so many reasons why women are underrepresented in rock bands, but I think that any attempt to make it be specific to this is misguided. When you look at there's no genre of rock music at all until you get to literally Riot Girl, where you have large numbers of women playing instruments. It's just
The only one I can think of is Vixen,
Oh, yeah, Vixen is basically and you have Doro and individual women.
That's right. Doro Pesch. That's right. Yeah.
But it's very much in Europe, and the thing is stylistically, a big front runner of a lot of the glam metal bands are the Runaways. The Runaways,
right? Yeah.
Very sound a lot like what these bands came to be as well, but there are not as many followers.
The thing about Vixen, they came up on that playlist that you sent, and I was listening to it while doing things around the house, so I wasn't looking at exactly what was coming up as it came up, and it took me halfway through the song before I went, are these women singing? And looked at the thing and then looked up the band, because all of the rest of the hair metal bands, the guys sing in that upper register anyway. So, they're singing at the same pitch as all of the dudes do. It's just that if you listen, you can hear that they're not guys, probably, you think. No, it is a very stylistic, there are specific stylistic approaches to singing that are
I mean, honestly, one of the biggest differences between grunge and glam metal are the vocals. And I don't actually like grunge vocals. And so you can see where I kind of fall on these things. But I think like it's a lot of it sort of more comes off as more of an androgynous sound, even though that sort of reinforced falsetto is like rough on your voice. And so a lot of these dudes can't fucking sing anymore.
Yeah.
Busted vocal cords, had to have surgery, need to go back and get coaching. Like,
yeah.
The ones who still sound similar to how they used to, you're like, it's shocking. It's shocking to me.
I mean, particularly since as you say, this was a scene, right? This was people going and seeing each other's bands at clubs and bars around LA. So while what you see as a consumer is this highly produced, very expensive, very glamorous, and I think the production is another thing worth talking about, because I do think that hair metal exists
a really good,
in an interesting phase of studio technology that's part of why it sounds the way it sounds. But like, I guess my point is all of these like super high power falsetto guys, they were just doing that. They weren't people who were I've classically trained my voice to be able to do that.
That is a great point about the production values, because grunge's sonic aesthetic was anti that, specific, like deliberately.
Yeah.
But then if you say, so there's this musical act and the lyrics are all about laying pipe and they're really technically proficient, and honestly, you can argue that it's overproduced, and for every banger there's a ballad. I just described Prince. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And nobody hates Prince, and nobody criticizes Prince for being overproduced or for all of his songs being about chicks. But hair metal gets this shadow cast upon it because 30 years ago now, some people wanted to sell something else, and they were like, okay, that thing sucks, so that's why you want to buy this. And I don't want to disparage grunge, because I was a big fan of that stuff too. But I don't need to hate Motley Crue in order to like, I almost said Guns N' Roses. I don't need to hate Motley Crue to like Nirvana. Which I guess brings me in a roundabout way to the Metallica Black album, which came out in September, I think, of '91. It came out like 3 or 4 weeks before Nevermind. And I want to say Siamese Dream came out at around the same time.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's when grunge is now it. But listen to the Metallica Black album. With Enter Sandman was the first single, and I think the last single about a year later. So for 1 year, we got to watch James Hetfield wearing black T-shirts in videos every month. A new video is a song called "Sad But True," and Enter Sandman is the example I usually use when I say what I'm about to say. But "Sad But True" is even really, really more so. Listen to those, shut your eyes, and imagine Alice in Chains. And just imagine, instead of James Hetfield wearing his black T-shirt on a stage, it's the Alice in Chains dudes wearing leather trench coats walking through a farm or whatever. And it's the same goddamn thing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So my thing about the Metallica Black album, it's functionally a grunge album, is coming out of San Francisco, not Seattle. This was happening. This was happening. This is where things were going. The Dr. Feelgood album, I think that's the one you were mentioning.
Yes.
Yeah. It's harder than was Theater of Pain before it?
Yes.
No, Girls, Girls, Girls was before. Girls, Girls, Girls is harder than Theater of Pain. This was going in that direction. Guns N' Roses. Who was it who pointed out?
Sorry.
What's that?
Sorry, actually, Motley Crue goes up and down when it comes to that. They're not.
I guess that's because the Shout of the Devil record is kind of hard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like pretty. It's basically punk. Yeah.
Yeah. Who was it? Was it Tyler Manco who pointed out that if you slow down, if you play a Smashing Pumpkins song at half speed, it basically just sounds like Slash.
Oh, yeah, it might well have been. I mean, the thing I was going to say about Smashing Pumpkins certainly is that, like, they are interesting they're an interesting part of this discussion because they get lumped in with grunge, but Billy Corgan has always been way more of a metal and prog metal guy. Even at his grungiest, he's always been like, let's layer guitar solos. Let's, all of that kind of stuff.
Wow. You guys are going to make me listen to Smashing Pumpkins for the first time since they inundated my world in junior high. And I was like, not for me. Like that all sounds very appetizing to me. I resented that one song that people tried to market to me as goth because I was goth then, and I was like, "That's not goth. Please leave me alone."
The one with the
Zero.
Is that what it was?
It was the song with Zero.
It's got
a vampire. I was like, no, it's not. But you're making me curious about going back to listen to those boys. What blew my mind here is so your point about that era of Metallica is 100% right. Very smart. And something else to remember with Alice in Chains. Alice in Chains was a hair metal band. Like literally, there's photos, there's evidence, there's proof.
Yeah.
Duff from GNR is from Seattle and was friends with all of those guys.
That's what I was wondering about that. I've wondered about that because I know that the famous story of them writing Paradise City in a van. They were driving back from Seattle. Right?
Seattle, yeah.
Right.
They were like traumatized by Seattle.
So that means they couldn't have been playing Paradise City, meaning they were pretty early in their career. So at some point, Guns N' Roses was driving up to Seattle and playing before they were Guns N' Roses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So
they were opening for The Cult, a former goth band.
Right.
In that tour, and
You brought them up. I didn't, which is weird because usually I'm the motherfucker who brings up The Cult. Are The Cult hair metal?
They're hair metal during the era of hair metal, but they have many different phases. I mean, right? Like they're a goth band that are clearly from the same sort of people like you too, like the weird Irish proto goth stuff. Right. And then they were a goth band for a while and they continue to be quite goth. And it really, it's a little of everything. And they also have a lot of psychedelic music influence to them. That is like, they have more zombies and Beatles than you'd imagine. And obviously Ian Astbury ends up singing as replacing Jim Morrison for the Doors for like a couple of years.
Yeah.
But there are a couple albums by them that are deliberately trying and going for that market. And I think are produced for that market. Like the production sounds like it. So they landed somewhere in there along the way. And The Cult are fabulous.
They're terrific.
I saw them in '96.
I've never seen The Cult.
I mean, I guess, if there's a kind of central theme of this whole episode, it's that the borders of these things are always much more porous than people like to claim they are,
That is my North Star for the hair metal discussion writ large, is that what counts and what doesn't count. And oftentimes what you'll find if you ask people what counts is stuff they don't like and what doesn't count is the stuff they like.
Yes.
And that just kind of pisses me off. You know what I mean? Because the only other thing I can think of where people are this just openly hypocritical without even caring is there was a very long period, and maybe this is still going on. I'm just not as hip as I once was. So I'm never out talking to people I don't know anymore. People will say that they don't like country music.
Right.
And then this will always immediately be followed up with, except for Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash.
And it's like, okay, so then it's not country music you don't like because at least something like you was there for you. And it's a little bit of a coincidence that the only one you like is the one who was played on MTV in the 90s. That's a little bit.
That was legitimate for you. Serious music for people like you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just to jump on your annoyance secondhand, it's kind of a criminal lack of curiosity, because if you do find that modern country doesn't do much for you, which by my book, fair enough, a lot of modern country I find deeply tiresome, but you do like Johnny Cash, there is an avenue of curiosity there to go, okay, well, what's Johnny Cash doing, and who was Johnny Cash listening to, and who was listening to Johnny Cash, and then you find that
you like Johnny Cash, you're probably going to be cool with Waylon Jennings. You're probably
totally
like that too,
and you're going to discover that the border between when Johnny Cash is kind of at his early peak, the border between country and rock and roll is incredibly porous because Johnny Cash was working in the same studio as Elvis and Roy Orbison, you know?
For real. No, and I the other thing is, like, I have had so many people, they don't want Guns N' Roses to count as hair metal because they like Guns N' Roses.
Right, exactly.
What I do think that speaks to is I think Guns N' Roses is one of the great bands. So, like, I'm not saying they're better than the Beatles, but I am saying that they're like the Beatles of like the 80s, 90s. You know what I mean? Like, they're a band that is going down as like, this is truly a great band, despite having not a ton of output, right?
Yeah. It's really weird when you look at the depth of their influence and how little they actually put out during the period. Like when we talk about Guns N' Roses, we were talking about like 87 to 92, somewhere in there. Not a really long period of time. I mentioned this. I mentioned actually in the Misfits discussion we had, I mentioned that I lived near a middle school. When we did that episode, I did not have a son in middle school. Now I do. So I'm around middle school kids all the time now. And Guns N' Roses t-shirts, like, these kids know who Guns N' Roses are. And you know, they have stayed in the zeitgeist.
That's great, because I'll tell you, my brother's 5 years younger than me, and he was telling me that his friends in school did not know Guns N' Roses, and I was horrified, shocked, and confused. And he was a rock band kid, so I'm like, your friends who play guitars don't know who they are.
That's
like, this is. It was a weird, dark period, but generally speaking, I do think they're a band that, because people like them, they're like, well, except for them.
Guns N' Roses is definitely the Johnny Cash of hair metal. They're the one that you can say, you know.
I think it's the episode's sentence to have on a t-shirt, entirely sans context there.
Right. You know what I haven't talked about that I need to, though, is that the thing that helped me really re-embrace a lot of this music when I came to it again as an adult was recognizing it as camp. And, you know, I'm a huge fan of the Misfits and Danzig. In fact, I really enjoyed your episode. And in fact, the very first conversation I ever had with the person who I married to was about Danzig, like for like an hour. But I also always regarded that as camp as well. And if you're like, you know, you're sitting here, and maybe it is because I'm looking back on it and it's in the 21st century, and I'm watching these bands that I'm like, this is all camp. David Lee Roth's solo work is like 100% camp, and he's going for that. Like, that's, so if you're someone who doesn't believe camp could be intentional, then I guess there's a question.
Absolutely.
But David Lee Roth is like, yes, I'm making camp.
There's
sorry.
There was a Van Halen song on the playlist, which I think is a Yankee Rose.
Yankee Rose,
where they do
that's David Lee Roth's solo album.
So that's right, but they do the and the God's Made Love, like the guitars are talking to me thing, except that instead of like Profound Secrets from the Beyond, the guitar is saying, "Hey, check that chick out." And they're doing a wolf whistle, and David Lee Roth talks back and forth to it like it's a cartoon character, you know.
But he's doing that to the Statue of Liberty. It's a song in which the David Lee Roth is sexually as a he's street harassing the Statue of Liberty, which and that's like he talks about her very specifically as an icon. Which, you know, I certainly connect to his Jewish identity personally, but it's an amazing thing. So he's very deliberate about it being camp, and then the other guys are a range of intentional to non-intentional, depending. I mean, some of the really show-many bands like Wasp or Motley Crue have to be doing this with at least a bit of camp, and like those are definitely not guys who are saying like, oh yeah, I'm a real Satanist, because there are bands that are like, no, I am a real Satanist. These are not guys who are like, I'm a real Satanist, but they're definitely like pentagrams on fire burning.
And the bands who are real Satanists tend to sound like you put all of your cutlery in the incinerator, like. They don't sound like highly polished, highly technical hair metal.
Yeah. I mean, not every guy in those bands is very polished. I mean, there's certainly guys in there where you're hearing a lot of rework happening in the studio from producers. And, I love Rat, but like every producer who's worked with him is like, I saved that. Not specifically the vocals, not the rest of the band. Like people, I think generally respect like Bobby Blotzer and like they respect, like Warren, but like, and that's fine. I mean, the end result I got was something that I love to listen to. Like, I think Rat is outstanding.
Yeah. I mean, I did mention the production thing, and I do think that an element of the way that these bands sound and how come they sound that way is that it was an era of studio technology where it became way more possible to do that kind of stuff. And certainly you can hear things like the sudden availability of decent digital reverb units, meaning that that everyone can have these cavernous drum sounds on, without having to have a physical enormous space to put them in. Yeah. I do think that's a big element as well, that it kind of happened at the right time that they could sound that way.
And you can't sound like Vince Neil without a microphone. It's not audible. Like that sound he produces is not audible without a microphone.
Right.
Like somebody like Steve Tyler is like a freak of nature and has some real technique and he can project, but like the thinner sound you get from Vince Neil is only possible with a serious microphone.
Yeah. That's true.
And he's great for their band. Like the band over time, you can hear them figuring out how to play to what he can do, because there's lots of things he can't. Yeah. But like once they figure it out, they're like, it's great. He's the perfect vocalist for them. I wouldn't have him do anything else, but like he's perfect for them.
They are probably the pinnacle of bands that on paper this should not work at all, and yet they absolutely do.
Everybody, sorry.
Yeah, just that the only one in there that I think it's Mick Mars is really the only one who I think this guy was he's so good that
Mick Mars. Sorry.
No, please. I always want to hear someone else say good things.
Mick Mars.
Most people don't.
Mick Mars is older than the rest of the band by a lot.
Right.
So he had been a warrior on the Sunset Strip, working musician, playing the grind forever. Right. And these young guys, especially Nikki Sixx, who everyone in the scene kind of considered a visionary for like his ideas, or like, come be like the excellent guitar player in my band that is largely spectacle. Yeah. And Mick's like, you want me to do this? I'll do that for fame. So he is like, great, I'm going to wear this crazy shit. And you'll see some guys like that throughout. You'll be like, that guy's not young. And that's because, these guys have been slogging it out through the 70s. So you get some of these interesting intergeneration. It's not that big of an age difference, but that's why you have the fight between Motley Crue now, where he needs to retire. He physically can't play anymore. And the rest of the band is trying to stiff him. Yeah, it's fucked up, but it's like, dude, this is an older man. You cannot make him do this. Like, let him go. Pay him, because like you wouldn't be anything without this excellent guitar player. Yeah, I mean, Nikki Sixx is the writer of the material, but like it's still like you need Mick Mars is, he's great.
No, because I mean, another thing that, and we are getting towards time, so we need to wrap up at some point. But one of the other things that I would say about hair metal is often what you're hearing is like virtuosic takes on what would otherwise be not necessarily the most stunning material. Like if you had a bunch of people who weren't able to do all of that stuff, or were trying to do it acoustically so that they didn't have super high gain guitars that they could widdly on, do that kind of music, it would lose a lot of its impact, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Yes.
An example is Quiet Riot did Come On Feel the Noise, Slade's song. And if you listened, oftentimes when a younger band covers an older song, there is more technical virtuosity in the cover. But if you play Slade and Quiet Riot next to each other, Slade's guitars are doing more than Quiet Riot's are.
But you know why, right?
What's that?
But you know why that is, right? Oh, that's deliberate. They didn't want to record that, so they say.
Really?
So the band
I didn't know
claimed. So that was a one take. That was a one-take recording.
Really?
Now, I'm curious if you go and you listen to compare that, because they covered another Slade song later. They covered Mama, We're All Crazy Now. I suspect, and I haven't done an A/B test on this, and I wish I had, that you will hear them doing a lot more in Mama, We're All Crazy Now, because at that point they realized that they are making a living by sounding like Slade.
Right.
Now, the band insists that they didn't want to do the cover, and fans have taken that to mean that the band didn't want to do the cover because they didn't like Slade. Mm-hmm. A few of them have said Slade is cheesy. Others have not been on record. I think they didn't want to do the cover because you want to do your own songs, because that's how you get money. Like, come on, guys. Because stylistically, one, he sounds like Naughty. And if you don't, I mean, he sounds more like him on the albums in which that begins, but I have listened to the earlier Quiet Riot, and there's a naughtiness to it in the first place, for sure. And they have stylistic similarity. So it's not completely unreasonable, but it definitely was something they then, after they, but the reason it sounds like way sloppier is because that is literally the take.
They did it once.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And they didn't want to do it. And they were like, no one wants to be here. We're angry at you. We don't want to do this. We're going to make it bad deliberately. And the record label is like, and I think the band was just sort of like, they caught some lightning in a bottle. Partially, the song is that good.
It really is.
That song is that good. Like, I'll do a cover it and it'll get on the radio. I mean, not the radio doesn't like rock music anymore, but like I'm saying, the song is that good. You can do it. But there's something really fun and loose about their interpretation. Sure.
Yeah.
Well,
and those guys had been working for years before they broke through yet again.
That's right. Yeah. And Randy Rhoads had been in them, right?
Mm-hmm. Randy Rhoads. I mean, all these guys are coming in and out of.
Right.
It's a scene.
Right.
Well, look, thank you guys very much for talking. We are out of time. I like to do two things by way of wrapping up. The first is to ask if, you have further recommendations if people have enjoyed this conversation and they want to reappraise hair metal. Is there a good way to do that? I know, Elana, you sent me a playlist that you had put together as part of an article about, I think, the show Peacemaker, where it was sort of tangentially relevant. But is there other stuff that you would recommend people checking out? Are there good accounts of the scene?
So, if you want to read a history of Van Halen, the Van Halen Rising book is written by an actual historian. A lot of the things that we have out there are not written by actual historians. So this one is, and but it's also very accessible. I also think you should check out, I have been on podcasts to talk about this topic before, including specifically David Lee Roth and Van Halen on Is It Camp? I spoke about the scene and genre more broadly on Junk Filter podcast. And I spoke about Def Leppard and Cinderella on Crossfade. In Bloom is a YouTube show where I go to get interviews with the people from the scene directly, but I don't think that's a starting point. But I'll just say that a lot of what I say is because I have watched those interviews. Yeah. And I guess I would say that if you do decide to watch the Penelope Spheris documentary, is that I think that a lot of people in that documentary are much more aware of what they're doing and performing as than people who have watched the movie since seem to understand.
Yeah.
And that they were playing up and performing for the camera and being outrageous. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's some people who watch it like, oh my God, these guys are so dumb. And I'm like, I mean, some of them are, but they're not all dumb. Tie Me Down is not dumb. He's doing a bit. I don't know. Chris Holmes is doing a bit. He's also an alcoholic. So that's also true. Yeah. But people are performing. But it gives you a snapshot of what it looked like on the Strip, certainly.
At its height, yeah. My recommendation would be any playlist will give you a broad overview. The movie Decline of the Western Civilization Part 2. You probably want to watch that just to feel like you're there and in it for a little bit. It's a really well done documentary.
But it also will make you hate them. I don't think that you can watch that movie. If I came into that movie being cynical of the genre, it would not help. It's not there to.
That's probably true. I've never thought about it that way. Because I've seen it a bunch of times, but I came in thinking that it was awesome.
Yeah.
I would recommend reading the book The Dirt. It is quite literally the greatest book that's ever been written.
My brother said the same thing.
What's that?
My brother said the same thing.
It's
he
so
said
good. It's
the greatest
so
book's ever been written.
good. And they made, I think it was Netflix did a movie version of it.
Yeah, I've seen
It's
the
okay.
Netflix movie, and it was not
It's all right.
great.
It's okay.
I wanted it to be good because I wanted to do a whole media circuit, like as the kid expert, but like it was like, no, nobody's going to watch this movie. But yeah, so The Dirt is the band biography of Motley Crue, of all the members. With their sides of, just for folks who are not,
Right.
But yeah.
So I would recommend reading that. And I think those three things would be my recommendations.
Excellent.
And my article about Peacemaker is, I think does a nice little breakdown about the scene and some songs and explains that as well. It's because
we
women write about comics.
I'm
sorry?
We didn't even talk about Home Sweet Home and how that changed the world, but
it did.
It did.
Well, look, again, thank you very much, guys. Can you plug your things if you have things to plug? I know, Elana, you're on, as I said at the start, a couple of different podcasts and also write for various places.
So yeah, Graphic Policy Radio is my home base where I don't talk about music that much, but I will be back on Junk Filter podcast to talk about the Byrds and Graham Parsons and Graham Parsons related things, i.e. not this, but definitely very California in the near future. My Blue Sky is my primary social media account, which is LEVIN. That's LEV as in Victor, IN. Blue Sky is a great place to talk with fellow music lovers and not deal with Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. And I've written about the genre and Van Halen particularly. I have a Medium page that has links to that. And then you're probably thinking about some of my old school goth, which is actually not on the internet. It's like pre-internet. I should scan some of my old clips from Propaganda magazine. But yeah, I was briefly goth for pay, which is a great honor.
Excellent. John, do you have anything to plug?
Not really. I just a week ago sent in a new play to a producer. So cross your fingers. But and I'm on Blue Sky. I think it's just my name and John A. Cecil at Blue Sky. It's but the handle I use is Red Peppers, Cocaine, and Milk, which is another rock and roll reference.
Yep.
But,
Excellent.
Lana's absolutely right. It is a great place for discussions about music, and Elon Musk has nothing to do with it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure.
You've been listening to Reserved Recommendations, a radio show and podcast from Manawatu People's Radio, Te Reo Irirangi o ngā tangata o Manawatu. The show was produced and presented by me, Hugh Dingwall, and I also composed our theme music. It's called Sack Jazz, and you can find it at wolfboy.bandcamp.com. If you enjoyed this show, why not go ahead and share it with a friend? You can find the last 10 episodes of this show at npr.nz/show/reserved on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you get your podcasts. If you want an episode older than that, try searching for Reserved Recommendations on YouTube. You can find me at Objective Reality on Blue Sky or send emails to objectivereality@gmail.com. You can also follow Reserved Recommendations on Facebook or Instagram. And finally, Manawatu People's Radio is a non-profit community access station. If you like this or any other piece of their fine audio programming, why not fling them $1 or $2? You can go to npr.nz/donate for more information on how to do that.